The game starts with Mason waking up with no memory of where he is and asking about Reznov. Turns out he is in a wicked interrogation room. The interrogator tells him that in 1961 he served in the CIA assassination team known as Operation 40. He gets electroshocked while random numbers appear on the screens in front of him. Mason can't remember shit, and at one point they show him this guy Dragovich. The interrogator asks about the Bay of Pigs mission, and that triggers his memory. Turns out, back in 1961, Mason, Woods and Bowman were sent to Cuba to kill Fidel Castro. We get a flashback of that mission. Squad linked up with their contact Carlos inside a quiet Havana bar. Cuban troops storm the place. Suspicion turns violent and Woods attacks the officer. Since they are compromised, they fight their way through the streets and escape with a stolen car. Flashback to the team overlooking Castro's fortified compound. They see a signal, the invasion begins, and the squad ziplines straight into the compound. The trio sweeps through corridors until they reach the door. Behind it, Castro himself. The breach is violent. Castro grabs his mistress, using her as a shield. Mason doesn't flinch. One squeeze of the trigger, Castro drops. His mistress, armed and furious, makes a desperate move. She doesn't live long enough to regret it. The Cuban army surges back, pushing the team into the courtyard. Carlos clears the way, urging the team toward the military airfield where their escape waits. The agents pile into the plane as enemy forces close in. Mason leans out the back, tearing through soldiers with an M60 loaded with explosive rounds. But the runway is blocked, a full barricade of Cuban vehicles at the end. The plane won't make it. Mason makes the call. He dives off, sprints to an anti-air gun and rips the blockade apart. The plane roars into the sky, Woods screaming for Mason to hang on. But Mason stays behind, cut off, captured in the chaos. Dragged from the gun, beaten unconscious, Mason awakens on a dock. Looming above him, the real Fidel Castro, alive and well, alongside Soviet masterminds Nikita Dragovich and Lev Kravchenko. The man they killed was only a decoy. Castro spits his vengeance. Make sure he suffers. Mason was held captive at the Vorkuta Gulag, a Russian labor camp, for 2 years. After further interrogation, Mason recounts how, during his imprisonment at Vorkuta, he befriended Viktor Reznov, a former Red Army soldier and a returning character from Call of Duty, World at War. Together they are planning to escape the Gulag by sparking a full-scale uprising on the prison. Mason starts off in a fight with Viktor Reznov to draw out a guard. They kill the guard and secure the keys. They free other prisoners and begin to execute their escape plan. Mason fights his way down the tunnel where he meets Sergei. They use the lift to get to the surface. When the lift grinds open, Sergei storms forward, armed only with a pickaxe, and brutally takes the guard that was executing other prisoners. Mason grabs a gun and joins the fight as the mob of prisoners pushes forward, forcing open a massive steel door. It crashes wide to reveal a coal yard bathed in searchlights. Reznov, Mason, and Sergei hurl themselves behind a coal cart, shoving it forward along the rails, using its bulk as mobile cover. They manage to reach a gate. Mason blasts open a gate, leading the charge as the rebels clash with guards. Mason arms himself with an AK fitted with a grenade launcher, blasting enemies hiding behind rolling cover. The prisoners press toward a garage where Reznov finds a blowtorch, working furiously to cut into the armory door while Mason covers him. Inside they find a minigun and Mason uses it, but Soviets use tear gas, choking the uprising, dropping Mason to the floor. Reznov drags him to safety, and when Mason wakes, they're in the warehouse, staring at their chance for escape, motorbikes. Mason and Reznov smash through a window, tearing across the yard under heavy fire until they close on a train. Mason climbs the ladder, reaching for salvation. He shouts to Reznov to follow, but Reznov stays behind. He drives the truck into the pursuing army, sacrificing himself as Mason escapes. After the escape, Alex Mason has been cleared by polygraph testing and turned over to Jason Hudson of the CIA, and they are summoned to the Pentagon. Hudson and Mason meet U.S. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara in a limousine convoy, and they are brought to the Pentagon offices. Along the way, McNamara informs Mason that Dragovich poses a grave threat to national security. Mason passes through the Pentagon Nerve Center. He starts to breathe heavily and again experiences background auditory and visual hallucinations of numbers from a number station. The interrogator tells him they were watching him the whole that day at the Pentagon. In the present, Mason states to his interrogators that it felt as if he were in a dream, and he deliriously repeats fragments of Reznov's 8-part plan to escape from Vorkuta. The lead interrogator replies, "It was working." McNamara introduces Mason to President John F. Kennedy. Kennedy informs Mason that as the best man the CIA has, Mason must eliminate Dragovich. At the same time, Mason visually hallucinates picking up a pistol and assassinating Kennedy. The line between orders and hallucination blurs. The interrogator triggers another memory. Operation Flashpoint that was supposed to rip out the heart of the Soviet space program and eradicate their long-range missile project by taking out the Ascension group formed from Nazi scientists co-opted by the Russians after the war. He also explained that Operation 40 had planted a double agent working with that group, a guy named Grigory Weaver, who was supposed to sabotage the launch of the Soyuz 2 rocket. Mason has a flashback of him, Woods and Bowman being sent to Baikonur to eliminate the group and Dragovich. While Mason and Wood are overlooking the launch site from a distance, they spot Weaver being compromised and tortured by Lev Kravchenko. They kill Soviet guards and use their uniforms to get inside the facility. They get to the communications building and manage to reach the roof. There, Mason uses a crossbow with explosive bolts to clear out the guards outside the bunker where Weaver was kept. The squad ziplines down to the bunker and rescues Weaver. He is injured but still is able to fight. They try to stop the launch, but since they fail to hack into the system in time, Mason grabs a rocket launcher and shoots it down and it blows up. They proceed to the underground facility and hunt for their targets, but it turns out Kravchenko managed to escape and they blow up Dragovich limo, believing he died in flames, but they never found a body. Interrogators try to dig deeper in his memories to find out what happened to Dragovich. Another flashback takes us to Vietnam. In 1968, Mason was part of the SOG unit led by Woods to recon uncover Russian activity in Laos. While they ride in the jeep, bombs explode and they crash. Hudson is injured, but soon he gets his shit back together and they defend the Khe Sanh base that is under attack. After a heavy battle, US soldiers manage to push out the enemies and make them retreat. Bowman arrives via helicopter, happy to see Mason and Woods alive. The interrogator tells Mason they know that inside the MACV compound in Hue City, he established contact with the Russian defector. When the NAV army surrounded the city, he went to look for him. While searching one of the buildings, Mason gets ambushed by an enemy soldier with the knife, but turns out Reznov saves his life, so he survived the Vorkuta riot after all. Reznov gives Mason an intel that Dragovich is planning an attack on the west. Since enemy soldiers are taking over the city, the team gets cut off and tries to reach a landing zone to extract, but Mason and Woods decide to get the wounded on a chopper and escape via boat. The interrogator tells Mason they got that dossier from Hue City, and they identified all the Dragovich men. There's also this Nova 6 project. Turns out they were sent to Kowloon City to get Dr. Daniel Clark, who was an engineer working on that project. They capture him and try to make him speak about Dragovich. He gives them Steiner and tells he was hired to help stabilize Nova 6 compounds. He also reveals that Nova 6 is a biochemical weapon. The conversation is interrupted by enemy bullets. Weaver and Hudson manage to get on the roof and get out of the building. Streets are filled with Dragovich men, but they manage to escape, and on the way, Clark reveals that the Nova 6 base is in the Ural Mountains. He also mentions some mysterious numbers that Dragovich's plan relies on, but he gets killed before revealing what they mean. Back at the interrogation room, Mason begins to memorize what Reznov told him. During the World War, Dragovich and Kravchenko used to collaborate with Nazis. At the end of the war, Soviets launched Operation Olympus and Reznov was detached to Unit 45 and sent to the Arctic Circle. There he served with Dragovich and Kravchenko. Their mission was to find Steiner, who offered his collaboration to the Soviets. They take over the base and find Steiner. Dragovich orders to show no mercy to the Germans, and Kravchenko kills even those who decided to surrender, and that triggers him to look for effective weapons that will turn over the war. Steiner explains how he discovered a highly effective chemical weapon. They planned to put Nova 6 into a V-2 long-range rocket and fire at Washington and Moscow. but Allied forces took over Berlin before they were able to use Nova. Soon it turns out that Dragovich's discovery of the German biochemical weapon Nova 6 illustrates his ruthlessness as he murders his own soldiers to witness the effects of the weapon, including Reznov's close friend Dmitry Petrenko. This mission ends with Reznov asking Mason to promise him that Petrenko's death will be avenged, and Dragovich, along with his allies, Kravchenko and Steiner, will be killed. Reznov and a few others were left behind on the ship, and soon British forces showed up also looking for Nova, but during the escape, Reznov managed to destroy the remaining supplies. Then he was captured and sent to Vorkuta. Mason explains to the interrogator that back in Vietnam, after they escaped the compound, they were shot down and Reznov survived. Mason gets stuck in a crashed helicopter that is drowning, but Reznov again saves his life. Then Mason describes how he and the rest of his squad from the SOG fight their way through Viet Cong-controlled territory in an ultimately futile attempt to chase an elusive Kravchenko, and are later sent to locate and investigate a downed Soviet plane containing Nova 6. But it turns out Kravchenko was faster and managed to carry out the cargo. During this investigation, Mason, Woods and Bowman are ambushed by the enemies. Both Kravchenko and Dragovich show up and Mason gets captured. The interrogator tries to explain to Mason that Reznov is not who he thinks he is and he can't be trusted. Mason refuses to believe that since he trusts Reznov after all they have been through. The interrogator reveals that the numbers Mason keeps hearing are broadcast since he has been brainwashed. Hudson learned that when he went to the Ural Mountains to look for Steiner while Mason was being captured. Mosley is approaching an SR-71 Blackbird in Beale Air Force Base in California. After approaching the vehicle, Mosley and Major Knight shake hands before boarding the aircraft. Plane is on a mission to assist the CIA commando team in passing enemy patrols. Turns out Hudson is a member of the Team Dar. The objective is to proceed to a Russian communications substation, disable short-range comms, and locate and seize evidence of weaponized Nova 6 gas. They manage to approach the base unnoticed, but once they get in, Russians are alarmed and a fight breaks out. The team manages to secure the station and Hudson is ordered to get to the base's satellite ground station. They break into the control room and they break the fuses, rendering the station useless. Once Hudson follows the team out of the building and across a metal catwalk. A Russian soldier fires an RPG at the catwalk, causing Bruce Harris to fall off the side of the mountain, though he is later captured by Russian soldiers. Hudson must sprint jump over the gap. The detonation also causes a large avalanche. As the snow rushes behind, the team have no choice but to jump down the mountain. With the aid of their parachutes, they survive the jump. The team will land just outside the main compound, but not far away. Russian personnel are burning documents in the open in an effort to eliminate evidence of research. The Kilo 1 team eliminates them, and because of its 20mm turret, the wall crumbles. Eventually, they find their way to the control room. The room is rigged to blow and Kilo 1 are sealed inside, but the team is contacted remotely by Dr. Steiner, calling from the Rebirth Island research facility to make a deal for his life in exchange for information on how to crack the numeric code that Dragovich uses in his sleeper cell broadcast. Steiner tells Hudson where he is and unlocks the room, and Hudson and Weaver escape with a stolen truck while the entire base is buried by avalanche. The interrogator reveals to Mason that Dragovich at this point has fully weaponized and deployed Nova 6. He has sleeper cell agents all over the US just waiting for the signal. The interrogator tells Mason that he knows about the sleeper cells and that the numbers are broadcasted from one location. At Vorkuta, Mason was programmed, so that means he can translate the codes. Mason has a flashback from Vietnam. He is imprisoned. Bowman gets killed by Spekna's operative when he refuses to play Russian roulette. Woods is next and he takes the risk. Then Mason is ordered to play, but he uses the gun on a guard and steals his weapon, quickly killing other guards. Mason and Woods fight across a vast swath of Vietnamese land in a stolen Mi-24 Hind to reach Kravchenko's base. At this base, Mason again meets Reznov, who leads him through the base towards Kravchenko. They confront Kravchenko, but he manages to knock them down. He recognizes Mason, but in the meantime, Woods recovers and stabs in the back, but Kravchenko pulls the pins off of 4 grenades strapped to his chest, forcing Woods to sacrifice himself by tackling Kravchenko out a window. The interrogator tells Mason only he survived, and when Mason tells Reznov also made it, the interrogator disagrees, telling again that he was the only survivor. Mason tells that together with Reznov they were continuing to seek out Friedrich Steiner at Rebirth Island with the intention of killing him. The interrogator tells him that was against the orders since the CIA was already on their way to get Steiner at the island. Mason explains they wanted to kill them all as an act of their personal revenge. After fighting their way through the Russian defenses and reaching Steiner, Viktor Reznov declares his name and then executes Steiner with his pistol right before the glass behind them is shattered by two hazmat suit-wearing soldiers. The interrogator tells Mason that they wanted Steiner alive and asks why he had to kill him. Mason yells back that the numbers told him to do it. 20 minutes earlier, when the CIA's assault on Rebirth Island begins, during the flashback, Hudson and Weaver are moving through the Russian compound into BTRS, accompanied by a platoon of US soldiers. Hudson and Weaver fight their way through until Hudson's BTR is destroyed by an Mi-8 helicopter. Nova 6 is then released by the helicopter, forcing Hudson and the soldiers to put on gas masks. After fighting his way to a clean air environment, Hudson attempts to contact Mason, but Mason fails to respond. At the same time, Weaver is contacted by Steiner, who tells him that all non-essential personnel are being executed by Dragovich's soldiers and that he might be killed too. When Hudson and Weaver get to the room where Steiner is located, both of them see Mason beating Steiner up and yelling that he's Viktor Reznov and that he will have his revenge. Hudson and Weaver, still in their hazmat suits, try to break through the glass by shooting it, only to find it is bulletproof. They then smash it with a crate, but are too late. Mason executes Steiner and shoots Weaver, but Hudson knocks him out cold. Weaver questions the whereabouts of Reznov, but Hudson states he was never there, since he died during the Vorkuta prison escape, and Mason seeing him was a result of his brainwashing. Interrogators reveal themselves as Hudson and Weaver. Hudson confronts Mason. He is desperate to get the location, and he begins to untie Mason, but the second he does that, he gets punched in the face. Mason escapes the room, hearing the number sequence, and is hunted by flashbacks. Soon, Hudson knocks him down. He takes him at a gunpoint and explains that Dragovich brainwashed him, but Reznov had plans of his own. He was never in Vietnam, and the real defector with the Nova 6 dossier died during the attack on the Mach-5. Reznov has been dead for 5 years, but back in prison he managed to break into Mason's brainwashed mind and program him to kill Dragovich, Kravchenko and Steiner. Hudson tells Mason that they need to leave as the Nova strike is imminent. Again, he explains that only he can stop the Nova attack, since he must know the code. Hudson one more time tries to play the broadcast, and this time it works. As the reprogramming of Mason's brain is finally broken, Mason recalls the origin of the numbers broadcast, a ship off the shore of Cuba called the Rusalka. A CIA raid on Rusalka begins, with Mason and Hudson infiltrating the underwater base protecting the ship, and Hudson calling the United States Navy to destroy the Rusalka. In the lower levels of the facility, Hudson and Mason confront Dragovich. He points a gun at Mason, but Hudson shots him in the arm. Mason begins to struggle with Dragovich and drowns him. At this point, the ship is falling apart, so Hudson leads Mason out of it. They swim to join others on boats, and Weaver tells Mason they won, but Mason responds, "For now." Then we see a cutscene with a woman broadcasting the numbers through the radio. Archive footage of President Kennedy prior to his assassination on November 22nd, 1963 is shown, revealing Mason was among onlookers who watched Kennedy disembark from Air Force One at Love Field. This suggests that since he was there, he might actually be responsible for the JFK assassination. And that's how the game ends.